The parking lot outside Fairview Plaza smelled like cut grass and asphalt heat, the kind of November afternoon in Fort Campbell, Tennessee, where the sun hung low enough to paint everything gold, but still had bite left in it. School was out, the base was winding down for the day, and the strip mall had that lazy rhythm every military town settles into between 1600 hours and dinner. Lieutenant Commander Reese Calloway stepped out of the dry cleaners with a folded uniform bag over her shoulder and her son's hoodie bunched in her other hand. She wore civilian clothes, dark cargo pants, a faded navy t-shirt tucked at the waist, and aviator sunglasses that did half the talking for her. Her son Ethan walked 2 steps ahead, soccer ball tucked under his arm, grass stains still smudged across his shins like war paint from a battle he'd already forgotten. "You said we could get smoothies after," he said without turning around. "I say a lot of things," Reese replied, catching up with a half smile. "But you also said you wouldn't slide tackle during recess." He spun, grinning wide. "It wasn't a slide tackle. It was a controlled deceleration. That's not a phrase a 10-year-old should use after eating concrete. You taught me that phrase." She had, and the fact that he remembered made something warm settle in her chest, even as she scanned the parking lot with eyes that never really stopped working. Old habits, seal habits, the kind that didn't retire when you did. She noted the skateboarders weaving between cart returns, noticed the van with tinted windows still running near the end of the lot, saw the man 3 stores down arguing into his phone on speaker. Her brain cataloged each one, assessed threat level, dismissed them all in the span of 2 heartbeats. Ethan didn't notice. He was mid-sentence about his school's science fair, something about volcanoes and baking soda, when he stopped to tie his shoe. Reese instinctively put her arm out, guiding him back toward her side. Nothing dramatic, just protective placement. Muscle memory from a life lived in vectors and angles even in peacetime. They crossed toward the corner smoothie shop. The door was propped open with a painted rock. A chalkboard sign outside advertised a mango special with too many exclamation points. Inside, 3 families waited ahead of them. A girl with braces asked for oat milk. A father in ACUs gave his toddler the last sip of strawberry banana. "Go grab a table by the window," Reese said, brushing Ethan's shoulder. He took off toward the corner booth ball still under his arm, like it was grafted there. She stayed behind to order, waiting in line as the afternoon light slanted through the glass and turned the tile floor into a chessboard of shadow and shine. Behind her, a voice cut through the hum. "Move it, lady." Reese shifted to the side without comment, just enough to let 2 young men pass. Early 20s, baseball caps pulled low, swagger that smelled like cheap cologne and entitlement. They didn't look at her again. One of them muttered something under his breath. The other laughed short and sharp. She didn't react, didn't even blink. But she did glance toward Ethan in the booth, still smiling, still safe. Then she turned back to the counter and waited, because this afternoon was supposed to be normal. Just smoothies and small talk and the kind of quiet that mothers earned after years of controlled chaos. But something in her gut had shifted. And if there was one thing she'd learned in 10 years of combat, zones, convoy runs, and hostile terrain, it was the difference between noise and threat. This wasn't noise. Outside, the sun had dropped just enough to sharpen the shadows beneath the awnings and make everyone squint as they stepped into the light. Reese held both drinks, 1 mango strawberry, 1 plain banana with oat milk, and scanned the sidewalk when she saw him. Ethan, standing by the corner of the plaza, back to the wall, clutching the soccer ball tighter than usual. She moved fast, but not rushed. Training didn't let her do anything with panic. As she closed the distance, she heard it. "Hey, tough guy." One of them was saying it, the taller one. Same voice from inside the shop. He stood between Ethan and the rest of the sidewalk, blocking him in with his body and his tone. "You think being a little mama's boy gets you out of saying, 'Excuse me'?" 2 young men, the same 2, baggy hoodies despite the heat, mirrored sunglasses, sneakers so clean they had never touched anything harder than a mall floor. Not in uniform, not local either, judging by the flat Midwest accent, but full of something dangerous. The kind of confidence that came from never being told no. Reese stepped forward and placed both smoothies on the concrete bench beside the planter box. Then she inserted herself between her son and the 2 men without saying a word. Ethan didn't speak either, but his eyes locked on hers. She didn't kneel, didn't hug him, just placed her hand lightly on his shoulder, anchoring him. The taller one leaned his weight from one foot to the other, smirking like he'd already won something. We just said, watch it, lady. Your kid nearly rolled into us like a stray dog. Reese spoke calmly, evenly, the way you'd explain something to someone who should already know better. He's 10, you're 20, adjust your posture accordingly. The second man, wiry and shorter, laughed like it was a punchline at a bar. Oh, now she's giving orders. Reese didn't move. Her voice stayed level. No, I'm giving you an out. They glanced at each other, half smirking. Then they looked at Ethan, who still hadn't moved. The tall one tilted his head. Kid looks scared. He's not, Reese replied, but he's about to learn what a bad decision looks like from 6 feet away. The shorter one stepped forward, not with purpose, just the swagger of someone used to bluffing their way through confrontation. Or what? You gonna call your husband? Reese's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. He doesn't take these calls anymore. But I do. That made them pause. Half a beat. But that was the danger with cowards who perform confidence. They couldn't tell when the tide turned until it was pulling them under. The tall one scoffed and turned to Ethan. Maybe next time you say sorry, kid. He reached forward, maybe to pat his head, maybe to knock the ball from his hands. Ethan flinched. Reese stepped between the hand and her son so fast the man barely registered the movement. Back off, she said flatly. The shift was microscopic, only posture. Her shoulders squared, her head tilted 5 degrees left. Her heels aligned beneath her hips like a platform being locked into place. But it was enough for someone watching. An older man sitting near the bakery had been watching since the beginning. He put down his coffee. The 2 men didn't move yet. They were still playing. Ethan looked up. Mom? Reese didn't look down. Didn't break eye contact with the tall one. Stand behind me. Not loud, not angry, just final. And in that moment, the balance of the street changed. The crowd didn't know why, but the men were about to find out. The plaza had gone quiet in the way public places do when something tense begins to take shape, but no one knows how it will end yet. A stroller wheel squeaked somewhere behind the smoothie shop. A shopping cart clanged against the curb. Even the skateboarders had stopped, boards tipped on their sides, eyes half fixed on the slow-moving confrontation. The taller man shifted his weight, amused now, emboldened by the still attention gathering at the edges of the sidewalk. He angled his chin downward, looking at Reese the way someone looks at a problem they think is harmless. You're real serious for someone blocking a sidewalk. Let your kid talk for himself. He doesn't need to, she replied evenly, and neither do you. The wiry one snorted. You hear that? She thinks she's in charge. Ethan tightened his grip on the soccer ball until the seams creaked. His shoulders pulled inward, chin dipping, but his eyes hadn't left his mother. He knew her stances, knew that stillness. He'd seen it before, once when a stranger yelled at her in a grocery store, another time when a dog lunged too fast toward him at the park, but he'd never seen what stood in front of them now. The taller man stepped forward again, closer this time. His voice dropped, still cocky, but threaded with something defensive now. You want respect. Start by teaching your kid to watch where he's going. Reese didn't engage the insult. Instead, she looked at Ethan briefly. Her eyes softened just enough for him to read what he needed. It wasn't fear, it was instruction. Then she turned back to the man. You have 2 options. You leave or you apologize. The wiry one scoffed. Or you what? That's when the taller man reached forward again. Not carefully this time. His fingers brushed Ethan's shoulder with casual entitlement, the kind people use when they want to remind someone they're not afraid. Ethan instinctively stepped back. Reese moved. One hand caught the man's wrist just long enough to halt the momentum. Not twisting, not striking, just enough to interrupt it. But the interruption was all the permission he needed to escalate. Don't touch me, he snapped, jerking his arm back. The slap was sharp, open-palmed, driven by frustration and ego more than strength. It cracked across the side of her face. Everything froze. A collective breath pulled from the sidewalk. Someone gasped. A woman near the bakery covered her mouth. The skateboarder straightened instinctively. Ethan cried out, Mom! But Reese didn't stumble, didn't blink. Her head turned only slightly from the impact, a faint red shadow rising where his hand had landed. She didn't raise her voice, didn't rush forward. didn't change her tone. She stepped half a pace toward her son and placed her hand gently on the top of his shoulder, anchoring him behind her frame. "Stay behind me." Not louder than before, just more precise. The two men grinned with nervous bravado, mistaking stillness for surrender. "See," the taller one said, turning slightly as if addressing imaginary applause. "Just a little reminder, that's all." The wiry one laughed. "Guess you'll think twice now, right?" Reese said nothing. Her posture shifted subtly, shoulders relaxed, chin leveled, hands eased to her sides, weight settling into her heels with deliberate balance. But Ethan noticed. He saw the way her eyes changed, the way her jaw aligned, and for the first time in his life, something clicked inside him. His mother wasn't confused, she wasn't afraid. She was calculating, and everyone watching could feel it even if they didn't understand it yet. The moment after the slap stretched long and thin, as if the entire plaza waited for a storm that hadn't announced itself. But it wasn't a storm, it was something quieter, something exact. And the men standing in front of them were about to realize why her silence wasn't weakness. For a few suspended seconds, no one moved. The breeze barely touched the leaves above the plaza awning. A pigeon fluttered off a rooftop gutter and landed somewhere distant. The only sound was Ethan's breathing, quick and shallow, tucked behind his mother like a shadow. The two men still wore their smirks, but they were shrinking now. Not obvious, not retreating, just unsure. The slap had been their high ground, and they hadn't expected it to be quiet up there. Around them, the bystanders weren't just watching anymore. They were holding phones now, not raised, not yet recording, but unlocked, ready. A woman murmured to her partner, "Should we call someone?" "Call who?" he replied. "I think she's about to handle it." Behind the bench near the smoothie shop, the older man from earlier, a retired Marine, if the posture said anything, adjusted his ball cap and leaned forward just slightly. He wasn't intervening. He was observing closely. The taller man took another step back, stretching his arms as if playing casual. "You going to say something, lady?" Reese's eyes didn't move. Her breathing had changed, not louder, not faster, just deeper, diaphragm level, regulated. The kind of breath a sniper takes before a shot. The kind a diver uses when seconds matter. Ethan noticed. He watched the line of her shoulders relax. Not slouch, just uncoil, as if she was letting go of something no one else could see. The wiry one squinted at her. "What do you like in yoga or something?" She blinked once. Slow. "You don't want to know." He scoffed again, louder now, trying to perform bravery in a crowd that was no longer laughing. "Try something then. Come on, you want to stand there like you're made of steel?" "Let's see it." The taller man chimed in, voice tightening. "Yeah, you think you're untouchable because everyone's watching? Hit me back. Go ahead." Reese didn't respond. She didn't move toward them, but she wasn't standing still either. Her feet shifted minutely, her weight angled. Her hips drew in half a degree, a dozen microscopic adjustments that no civilian would clock. But anyone trained would recognize immediately. Ethan felt it. She didn't have to say a word. He stepped back half a pace on instinct, holding the ball with both hands now like it might anchor him. He wasn't scared of her. He was in awe of her. "Mom," he whispered. She tilted her head just enough for her voice to reach him without anyone else hearing. "Eyes open. Don't look away." It wasn't a lesson. It was permission. At the edge of the crowd, a man in ACU's base security, or maybe off-duty, had quietly stepped forward. He wasn't speaking either. But he was watching her stance now, his head cocked the way soldiers do when they're reading terrain. The taller man shook his head, trying to dispel the weird weight in the air. "This is stupid. She's not going to do anything." The wiry one looked back toward Reese, voice louder, almost mocking. "You're all posture, lady. You don't scare anyone." That was the moment the final signal shifted. Not for them, for everyone else. Because no one watching believed that anymore. The taller one moved first. Because cowards always moved when they thought they still had the upper hand. He reached again. Not for the boy this time, but for her shoulder. A show of dominance. The kind meant to press a point. To remind the crowd that the earlier slap hadn't drawn blood. His fingers were halfway to contact when she broke his stance. No warning, no pause, Reese pivoted her body just enough to redirect his center of gravity, trapping his arm with a controlled pivot step, using his own momentum to send him twisting hard onto the concrete. His body slapped the ground louder than his hand ever had. A gasp rippled outward. One woman shrieked. Before his partner could react, her stance had shifted again. 2 steps forward, forearm aligned to center line, intercepting his instinctive swing. She blocked, redirected, and used a low sweeping step to unbalance him. He stumbled backward into the curb, landing hard on his elbow with a yelp. Neither man was injured, but neither could stand without reassessing everything they thought they knew about the woman in front of them. Reese didn't advance, she didn't posture. She stood between them and her son, calm, level, breathing steady. The taller one groaned and rolled onto his side. "What the hell?" She cut him off with 3 words. "You're done here." The wiry one started to rise again, face flushed with a mix of pain and confusion. "You think you can just—" She didn't let him finish. "Step back." Her voice wasn't loud, but it was final. It stopped him faster than a siren. All around, phones were filming now. The crowd had formed a loose semicircle. Mothers with strollers, teenagers frozen mid-sip. A barista from the smoothie shop half out the door with a hand over his apron. Not one of them looked amused, because what they'd just seen didn't match what they expected. The older man near the bench finally stood, arms crossed. "Well now," he said under his breath. That wasn't amateur hour. The 2 downed men sat dazed on the concrete, blinking up at the sky as if the sun had betrayed them. They weren't talking anymore. Reese adjusted her weight eyes, scanning the area, calculating risks. Her pulse remained low. Her stance was still textbook neutral. Behind her, Ethan hadn't moved. But he was no longer afraid. His small voice broke the silence barely above a whisper. "Mom, where did you learn that?" She turned her head slightly, just enough to make eye contact. "At work." A couple in the back of the crowd chuckled, unsure if it was safe to laugh. The wiry man tried again to rise, this time with less anger, more disbelief. "You crazy or something?" Reese didn't look at him, but her voice reached him like a command still ringing from a chain of custody. "Try anything else, and the next thing you'll feel is regret, not pain." It was the way she said it that stopped him. Not as a threat, as a promise. He dropped back onto the curb and looked away. The crowd was no longer watching the 2 men. They were watching her. Not for drama, for proof. And she gave them none. No smile, no smirk, no glory. She simply stepped back to her son, reached for the smoothie cup on the bench, and handed it to him. Ethan took it with both hands. "Still cold," he said, like it mattered somehow. Reese nodded. "That's because I move quickly." And somewhere behind them, the taller one finally realized. She hadn't fought back. She had controlled everything from the start. It took nearly 30 seconds before anyone in the crowd spoke again. And when they did, it wasn't loud. A man in a faded Marine Corps t-shirt, leaning against a lamppost, nodded slowly, almost to himself. Then he said it, not to the men on the ground, not even to Reese, but out loud enough for the air to hear. "That's not just anybody. She's Navy SEAL." It wasn't a guess. It was recognition. The kind that didn't come from YouTube or rumor. He'd seen that kind of movement before. Maybe in training, maybe deployed, maybe from the women who had to be twice as precise to be seen half as competent. But when he said it, no one in the crowd questioned him, because deep down they already knew. Reese hadn't defended herself. She had controlled the entire situation with surgical restraint. And now the silence wasn't confused. It was reverent. The wiry man was still sitting on the curb, his hoodie pulled halfway off, like he couldn't decide whether he wanted to look bigger or disappear. The taller one was quiet now, kneeling, rubbing his ribs without looking at her. They knew, even if they didn't know the word for it yet, they knew. Ethan stood beside his mother now, eyes fixed on the crowd. People weren't staring anymore. They were just adjusting, recalculating who she really was. "Is it true?" he asked softly. "What that guy said?" Reese didn't answer right away. She took a slow breath, watching as a mother ushered her daughter away toward the car, whispering something the child would remember years from now. Finally, Reese looked down at her son. Her voice was quieter than it had been all afternoon. "Yes." Ethan stared. "You're a Navy SEAL." I was. For how long? A while. His mouth opened like he might ask more. But the words got stuck somewhere between amazement and something deeper. He looked back toward the two men, now completely sidelined, the performance gone out of them. They hit you, he said. She nodded once. They made a mistake. He hesitated. You could have done worse to them. I could have, she said, but then I wouldn't be your mother. I'd just be someone who fights. Ethan looked down at his smoothie, then up again. You didn't fight back. I didn't have to, she replied, because I wasn't there to win. Then what? She looked at him evenly. To teach. Across the sidewalk, the older man in the Marine shirt stepped forward. He raised two fingers to his brow in a crisp, silent salute. Nothing exaggerated, just two people who understood the weight behind it. Reese returned a subtle nod, not out of pride, but out of respect. The crowd began to disperse naturally like a tide pulling back after a surge. No one clapped, no one made noise, but no one forgot. And the two men who had once stood tall in mockery now sat quietly in their own silence. They didn't ask for help, didn't demand an apology, because the look on Reese's face told them they were lucky the lesson had come with restraint and not regret. The police cruiser pulled in with its lights flashing, but no siren tires crunching slowly over the plaza's red brick loop. It wasn't called by Reese nor by any member of the crowd, just a clerk from the neighboring pharmacy who had seen the shove, heard the slap, and decided to call it in without waiting to see how it ended. Two officers stepped out, standard suburban precinct blues, not military, one male, one female, alert but not aggressive. Their eyes scanned the area, first toward the two men still sitting on the curb, then toward Reese standing calmly beside her son who hadn't let go of the smoothie. What happened here? The male officer asked. Reese didn't answer first. It was the man in the Marine shirt. Ma'am de-escalated a situation, he said, gesturing toward the downed pair. These two made contact with her son. She stepped in. They escalated. She responded precisely. The female officer looked from him to Reese. You're the one who was struck, Reese gave a single nod. Any injuries? No. The taller man on the ground grunted. She threw me on concrete. The Marine laughed softly. No, son, you threw yourself. She just let gravity finish the job. The officers approached Reese and Ethan. Ma'am, we'll need your name for the record, the female officer said gently. Witnesses already said you didn't provoke anything, but Reese produced her ID without a word, handed it over. The officer glanced down. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. Lieutenant Commander once retired, active Special Operations Group, local resident on base. The other officer blinked. You're Navy SEAL, Reese nodded once. Former. They both looked at each other, then back at the men on the curb. The wiry one tried to speak. She didn't say that up front. Shouldn't have needed to, the Marine muttered behind them. The officers moved methodically now. Statements were taken. Several bystanders stepped forward offering brief but unified summaries of what had happened. No exaggeration, just facts. She warned them, gave them chances. They touched her son first. She didn't start it. One woman handed over a video file already airdropped to her phone. The male officer turned back toward Reese as the scene settled. Do you wish to press charges? Reese looked down at Ethan. His eyes had steadied, the earlier fear replaced by something deeper. Understanding. She looked back at the officer. No, I don't need them charged. I need them to remember. The officers paused. Then the female one said, understood. Ethan tugged at his mother's shirt. Why not? She knelt for the first time all afternoon, one knee on the pavement, eyes level with her son. Because if they ever try this again with someone who can't stop them, there won't be a lesson left to learn. Ethan nodded slowly. She stood again, tall, composed, untouched. The taller man looked up at her now, not angry, not defensive, just aware. For the first time that day, he seemed to recognize who he'd been speaking to. The Marine approached quietly and offered Reese a folded slip of paper. What's this? She asked. Local Veteran Resource Council. We do community outreach. If you ever want to speak at the school or mentor, we'd be proud to have you. She accepted it with a nod. I'll think about it. The officers walked the two men over to the cruiser, not in cuffs, but with a silence that didn't need steel to feel like consequence. As they pulled away, the small crowd fully dispersed and the plaza returned to its normal hum. Only now it carried a different tone, quieter, more alert, because they just see someone rare. Not force, not revenge, control. The plaza had mostly emptied by the time Reese and Ethan began walking again. No one stopped them, no one asked questions, and yet every passerby offered a subtle nod, one of those rare acknowledgments between strangers who had just witnessed something they didn't quite have the words for. Ethan stayed close at her side, holding a smoothie in one hand, soccer ball tucked under the other arm. His walk was slower now, not tired, not scared, just thoughtful. They didn't talk at first. Reese didn't mind the silence. She never had. She walked the way she fought, measured, alert, present. Ethan finally broke the quiet. "Why didn't you tell me before?" She didn't ask what he meant. She knew. That I was a SEAL. He nodded. Or that you could do all that, the fighting, the calm, everything. She gave a faint smile without looking down. Because it's not who I am all the time. It's just what I've trained to do when it's necessary. But that guy hit you. I've been hit before. Didn't it make you mad? Reese took a breath, then answered carefully. It made me alert. That's not the same as angry. Ethan looked down. I thought you'd hit him back right away. I could have, she said. But then he wouldn't have learned anything. And neither would you. Ethan looked up at her, his eyes clearer than they'd been all day. You weren't trying to win. No, she said. I was trying to show you what not to become. They walked past the empty bench where the smoothies had first been set down. The sun had dipped behind the far roofline, now casting long shadows down the side of the strip. Reese adjusted her pace so Ethan stayed just ahead, subtly watching the way he carried himself. He didn't look shaken. He looked older. They reached the car and Reese unlocked it with a chirp of the fob. She opened the back door for him, waited as he slid in, then handed him the last of the napkins from her pocket. He wiped his hands, then leaned forward as she closed the door. Before she got in the driver's seat, he spoke again. Are you going to tell anyone? She paused with one hand on the door handle. No, she said, but I think they already did. The smile that crossed his face wasn't wide, but it was the kind that lasted, because for the first time in his life, he understood something most kids don't until much later. His mother wasn't just the one who packed his lunches, signed his permission slips, and told him to wear his helmet. She was someone people underestimated once, and never again. Reese slid into the driver's seat, checked the mirror, and started the engine. As they pulled out of the plaza, the last thing she saw was the man in the marine shirt still standing outside the bakery watching them leave. He didn't wave, but he nodded once. So did she. And then she drove on. That night after Ethan was asleep, Reese stood in her kitchen with a cup of coffee she hadn't touched, staring at the folded slip of paper the Marine had given her. Local Veteran Resource Council, community outreach, mentorship. Her phone buzzed on the counter, a text from an unknown number. Saw what happened today at the plaza. Just wanted you to know you made us proud. Semper Fi. She didn't respond, just set the phone down and looked at the wall where a single photo hung in a simple black frame. A younger version of herself in desert camo surrounded by her SEAL team. Faces she hadn't seen in years. Faces she'd never see again. Her phone buzzed again. This time a name she recognized. Master Chief Barrett Kane. Heard you had an interesting afternoon, Lieutenant. Coffee, tomorrow bakery at 0800. We need to talk. She stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back. Roger that, Chief. Because if Barrett Kane wanted to talk, it wasn't about smoothies or small talk. It was about something that mattered. And in the world she came from, that always meant trouble was coming. She just didn't know how close it already was. The bakery sat on the corner of Oak Street in Maine, close enough to Fort Campbell's Westgate that you could smell diesel and fresh bread in the same breath. Master Chief Barrett Kane was already there when Reese arrived at 0755, sitting at the corner table with 2 coffees and a newspaper folded beside his elbow. He wore a flannel shirt over a faded Marine Corps t-shirt jeans that had seen better days in the kind of posture that never really retired. 62 years old, silver hair cropped close, hands that still looked like they could tear a rifle apart blindfolded. He'd been her drill instructor 18 years ago, back when she was 18 and stupid enough to think she had something to prove. He'd taught her otherwise. Not through cruelty, but through the kind of relentless standard that turned potential into precision. She slid into the seat across from him without preamble. Chief? Lieutenant. He pushed one of the coffees toward her. Black, no sugar, the way she'd learned to drink it in the field. You made quite the impression on yesterday. Wasn't trying, never are. He leaned back, studying her the way he used to during inspections, looking for the thing you didn't know was out of place. But you did, and now the whole town's talking about it. Reese wrapped her hands around the cup, still hot. They'll forget by next week. Maybe. Kane pulled out his phone, tapped the screen, and turned it toward her. Or maybe not. The screen showed a Facebook group, Campbell County Patriots, 532 members. The top post was a video, dash cam footage from the plaza parking lot, edited. The beginning cut off so it started with Reese's hand catching the tall man's wrist. The angle made it look aggressive. The caption read, "Local woman assaults veteran's sons outside Fairview Plaza. Who is she?" The comments were a war zone. She's a hero. Those punks had it coming. Typical liberal violence, probably some Antifa transplant. I know her. That's Reese Calloway, Navy SEAL, retired. Women shouldn't be SEALs. This is what happens. My son goes to school with her kid. She's always been respectful. Reese scrolled through them slowly. The ratio was about 50-50, half the town defending her, half attacking. And in the middle, the worst kind of comment, the quiet ones, the ones that didn't take sides but asked dangerous questions. Does CPS know about this? Should someone with PTSD be raising a kid alone? What else is she capable of? She set the phone down. Who posted it? Anonymous account, created 2 days ago, but I did some digging. Kane pulled the phone back, swiped to another screen. A profile. The account's tied to an IP address registered to Walsh Construction. You know who owns that? Let me guess. Tall kid's father. Bingo. Gregory Walsh, local businessman, sits on the Chamber of Commerce. His boy Derek's been in and out of trouble since high school. DUIs. Bar fights. Daddy always makes it go away. Kane paused. But here's the kicker. Derek's buddy Tyler Brennan. His uncle's Marcus Brennan, county commissioner. And Marcus served with me in Desert Storm. Reese looked up. You think he's pushing this? I think someone is. That video's been shared 40 times in 12 hours. That's not organic, that's coordinated. Kane leaned forward. Reese, you embarrassed 2 boys who've never been told no, and their families have resources. This isn't going to blow over quietly. She took a sip of coffee, let the bitter warmth settle, then met his eyes. What do you need me to do? Nothing yet, just be ready. He folded his hands on the table. There's a town hall meeting tonight, 7 o'clock, county building. Marcus Brennan called it. Says it's about public safety and community standards. But we both know what it's really about. They're going to try to run me out. They're going to... Kane's jaw tightened. But they're going to fail because you've got something they don't. What's that? The truth in me. Reese felt something loosen in her chest. Not relief exactly, but the recognition that she wasn't fighting alone. Chief, you don't have to. Yes, I do. His voice went quiet, hard. The tone he used when there was no room for argument. You were my responsibility once. That doesn't expire. You understand me? She nodded. Good. Now drink your coffee. We've got work to do. The rest of the morning passed in preparation. Kane walked her through what to expect. Town halls in small military communities were rarely about facts. They were about feelings. About who could speak loudest, who could summon the most sympathetic faces, who could turn a crowd. They'll bring up your service, Kane said. Try to twist it. Make it sound like you're dangerous, unstable. They'll say things like trained killer and combat stress and hope it sticks. And if it does, then I stand up and remind them who the hell they're talking about. Reese appreciated that, but she also knew Kane couldn't fight every battle for her. She'd have to stand on her own eventually. By the time she picked Ethan up from school that afternoon, the weight of the coming confrontation had settled into her shoulders like old gear. Familiar, uncomfortable, necessary. Ethan climbed into the car with his backpack slung over one shoulder and a look on his face that said he'd had a rough day. What happened? Reese asked as she pulled out of the parking lot. Kids were talking. About yesterday, he nodded. Some of them think you're cool, some think you're scary. He paused. One kid said his dad called you a vigilante. Reese kept her eyes on the road. What do you think? Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I think you protected me, and I think people who weren't there don't get to say what you should have done. She glanced at him in the rearview mirror. 10 years old, but talking like someone twice that. That's a good answer. Did I get it from you? Probably. He almost smiled. Then his face got serious again. Mom, are we in trouble? She could have lied. Could have told him everything was fine, that adults were handling it, that he didn't need to worry. But Reese had never lied to her son, and she wasn't about to start now. Some people are upset, she said carefully. They think I went too far yesterday. There's a meeting tonight where they're going to talk about it. Are you going? Yes. Can I come? No, she said. Why not? Because you're 10 and this is grown-up business. He crossed his arms. It's about me too. I was there. Which is exactly why you're staying with Mrs. Kowalski next door. She met his eyes in the mirror. Ethan, I need you to trust me on this. Can you do that? He didn't answer right away. Then finally, reluctantly, he nodded. Okay. Thank you. That evening, Reese stood in front of her closet trying to decide what to wear to a town hall meeting where half the room wanted her gone. She settled on dark jeans, a white button-down, and a blazer. Professional but not stiff, respectful but not apologetic. She checked her watch. 18:30. Kane was picking her up in 15 minutes. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You should leave town before this gets worse. She stared at it, then deleted it without responding. Another buzz, different number. Thank you for what you did. My daughter saw it. She asked me if she could be strong like you. Keep fighting. Reese saved that one. Kane's truck pulled into the driveway at exactly 18:45. Punctual as always. She locked the door behind her, waved to Mrs. Kowalski through the window, where Ethan was already settled with homework and a plate of cookies, and climbed into the passenger seat. You ready? Kane asked. No. Good. Means you're paying attention. He shifted into reverse. Remember, let them talk first. Don't react. Don't defend. Just listen. When it's your turn, you tell the truth. Nothing more. Nothing less. And if they don't want to hear it, then I make them. The county building was a low brick structure with flags out front in a parking lot that was already 3/4 full when they arrived. Cars lined the street. People moved in clusters toward the entrance. Some Reese recognized from around town. Others were strangers. Inside the meeting hall smelled like floor polish and old wood. Rows of folding chairs faced a raised platform where 5 seats sat behind a long table. County commissioners. Marcus Brennan sat in the center. 55 years old, graying hair slicked back, expensive suit that didn't quite fit the setting. He looked like a man used to being the most important person in the room. Reese and Kane found seats in the back row, close to the exit. Old habits. The room filled quickly. By the time the meeting started at 1900, every seat was taken and people lined the walls. Marcus Brennan banged a gavel. The room quieted. Thank you all for coming, he said, his voice smooth and practiced. We're here tonight to discuss an incident that occurred yesterday at Fairview Plaza. An incident that has raised serious questions about public safety and the kind of community we want to be. Reese felt the shift in the room, eyes turning toward her, whispers spreading like static. Brennan continued, Now I want to be clear. We're not here to attack anyone. We're here to have a conversation, a civil conversation, about how we handle conflict in our town. A man stood up 3 rows ahead. Reese recognized him. Gregory Walsh, Derek's father. He wore a polo shirt with his company logo and the expression of someone who'd already won. Commissioner, if I may. Go ahead, Greg. Walsh turned to face the crowd. My son was assaulted yesterday, thrown to the ground by a woman who, by her own admission, has military training, special forces training. Now I'm all for supporting our veterans. But we have to ask ourselves, is this the kind of person we want living among us? Someone who uses violence as a first resort. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd, but also murmurs of dissent. A woman stood up, older, gray hair tied back. That's not what happened. I was there. Your son put his hands on her child first. She defended him. Walsh shook his head. With all due respect, ma'am, there's a difference between defense and assault. My son has bruises. He could have been seriously hurt. Then maybe he shouldn't have hit her first, someone else called out. The room erupted, voices overlapping, accusations flying. Brennan banged the gavel. Order, we will have order. The noise subsided, barely. Brennan looked directly at Reese. Ms. Calloway, would you like to address the room? Reese stood slowly, every eye locked on her. She could feel the weight of judgment pressing down like atmosphere before a storm. My name is Reese Calloway, she said, her voice steady. I'm a veteran. I served 10 years as a Navy SEAL. I have a son, and yesterday I did what any parent would do. I protected him. By assaulting 2 young men, Walsh shot back. By stopping 2 young men from hurting my child. She didn't raise her voice. Didn't need to. They had every opportunity to walk away. I gave them multiple warnings. They chose to escalate. I chose to end it without causing permanent harm. If I'd wanted to hurt them, they'd be in the hospital right now. They're not. They're embarrassed. There's a difference. A man in the front row stood up. Sheriff Clayton Voss. Reese recognized him from yesterday. He wore civilian clothes tonight, but carried himself like he was still on duty. I reviewed the full footage, Voss said, from multiple angles. Ms. Calloway's account is accurate. She was struck first. She responded with minimal force, textbook self-defense. If anything, she showed remarkable restraint. Walsh's face reddened. So we're just going to ignore the fact that she's trained to kill people. And there it was, the phrase Kane had warned her about, trained to kill. Reese felt the room shift, saw the way some people leaned back in their chairs, the way others leaned forward. Barrett Kane stood up. I trained her, he said. The room went silent. Kane walked down the aisle slowly, every step deliberate. He stopped at the front, turned to face the crowd. Master Chief Barrett Kane, United States Marine Corps, retired. I served 30 years, 2 wars, more deployments than I can count. And yes, I trained Reese Calloway. I taught her to shoot, to fight, to survive. But you know what else I taught her? He paused. Let the question hang. Honor, discipline, restraint, the things that separate warriors from killers, the things that make someone dangerous in the right way. He looked at Walsh. Your son put his hands on a child. Then he struck that child's mother. And he walked away with bruises instead of broken bones because she chose mercy over justice. If you can't see that, then you don't understand the first thing about what service means. The room was silent, utterly silent. Kane turned to Brennan. Marcus, you and I served together. You know what it means to make hard calls under pressure, to do the right thing even when it costs you. I'm asking you now, as a brother in arms, don't let politics poison this. That woman is a hero. Treat her like one. Brennan's jaw worked. For a moment, Reese thought he might actually listen. Then he said, Chief Kane, I respect your service. I do. But this isn't about honor. It's about liability. What happens next time? What if Ms. Calloway loses control? What if someone gets seriously hurt? Then you hold me accountable, Reese said. Not before I've done something wrong. Not because you're afraid of what I might do. Judge me on my actions. And my actions yesterday protected my son and showed restraint to 2 men who deserve far worse. A woman in the middle row stood up. She wore scrubs. Hospital staff, probably. I've seen Ms. Calloway at the VA hospital where she works. She's gentle with patients, respectful. She helps veterans who are struggling. Yesterday, she helped teach my daughter that women can be strong without being cruel. I don't know what more you want from her. Another person stood, then another. One by one, voices rose in Reese's defense. She volunteers at the food bank. She helped my son with his science project. She's never been anything but kind. But for every voice of support, there was a voice of doubt. What about next time? Can we really trust someone with that kind of training? What if she snapped? The meeting devolved into chaos. Brennan banged the gavel repeatedly, but the shouting continued. Walsh and his supporters on one side, Reese's defenders on the other. And in the middle, the silent majority who didn't know what to think. Finally, Brennan stood. Enough, his voice cut through the noise. Here's what's going to happen. The county will conduct an investigation. We'll review all available footage, interview witnesses, and we'll determine whether charges should be filed. Charges, Reese's voice was sharp. For what? Assault, endangering a minor, disturbing the peace. Brennan's face was stone. Until the investigation concludes, Ms. Calloway, I strongly suggest you keep a low profile. Is that a threat? It's advice. Kane stepped forward, his voice low and dangerous. Marcus, you do this, you're going to regret it. Is that a threat, Chief? It's a promise. The two men stared at each other. Old soldiers, old friends. Now on opposite sides of a line, neither wanted to cross but couldn't avoid. Reese put her hand on Kane's arm. It's okay, Chief, let's go. They walked out together. Behind them, the meeting continued, voices rising and falling like waves against a shore. Outside, the night air was cold and clean. Reese breathed it in, trying to clear the anger from her lungs. They're going to come after you, Kane said quietly. I know. Hard. I know. He looked at her, really looked at her. You scared? No. She met his eyes. Just tired. That's when they're most dangerous. When you're tired. He put a hand on her shoulder, the way he used to when she was 18 and breaking under the weight of training. Get some rest tonight. Tomorrow we start fighting back. How? The same way we always have. With the truth. Reese nodded, but as she climbed into Kane's truck and they drove through the dark streets back to her house, she couldn't shake the feeling that the truth wasn't going to be enough this time. Because the truth required people to listen, and half the town had already made up their minds. When she got home, Mrs. Kowalski met her at the door with a sympathetic smile and a plate of leftover cookies. Ethan was asleep on the couch, homework scattered around him like debris. How'd it go? Mrs. Kowalski asked quietly. About as well as expected. The older woman nodded. People fear what they don't understand, but they'll come around, you'll see. Reese wanted to believe that, but she'd been in enough firefights to know that hope wasn't a strategy. She carried Ethan to bed, tucked him in without waking him, and stood in the doorway watching him sleep. His face peaceful, innocent, unaware of the battle being waged on his behalf. Her phone buzzed, another unknown number. Town hall was just the beginning. If you don't leave, we'll make you. She stared at the message for a long time. Then she typed back one word. Try. And she meant it, because Reese Calloway had faced insurgents and Fallujah Taliban fighters in the Hindu Kush and her own doubts in the darkest moments of training. A small-town smear campaign didn't scare her, but it should have, because the next morning, everything changed. Reese woke to the sound of Ethan crying. She was out of bed and down the hall before her mind fully registered consciousness. Training, instinct, the sound of her child in distress overriding everything else. She found him in the bathroom, staring at his reflection in the mirror. His hands shook as he held up his phone. Mom, look. She took the phone. The screen showed a social media post. A photo of Ethan leaving school yesterday. Someone had edited it, added text. Son of a psycho, how long before he snaps too? The comments below were worse. Keep your kids away from this family. CPS needs to step in. That poor boy, growing up with a mother like that. Reese felt something cold settle in her stomach. Not fear, not anger, something beyond both. The kind of calculation that came before irreversible action. Who posted this? Her voice was calm, too calm. I don't know. Everyone at school is sharing it. She pulled him into a hug, felt him shake against her. It's going to be okay, she whispered. But she didn't know if that was true anymore, because they'd just crossed a line. They'd come after her child, and that changed everything. Her phone rang. Kane. You seen it? He asked without preamble. Yeah. Get Ethan, bring him to my place. We need to talk. Chief, they're targeting my son. I know, which is why you need to get him somewhere safe, now. Reese didn't argue. She got Ethan dressed, threw essentials into a bag, and drove to Kane's house on the edge of town. A small ranch with a meticulously maintained yard and an American flag on the porch. Kane was waiting outside. He took one look at Ethan's face and his jaw tightened. Inside, both of you. They sat at his kitchen table. Kane poured orange juice for Ethan, coffee for Reese. Here's what we know, Kane said. The posts are coming from a coordinated group, same group that posted the original video. Walsh Construction's digital fingerprints are all over it, but they're using proxy accounts to cover their tracks. Can we trace it? Sheriff Voss is trying, but it's going to take time. Time we might not have. He looked at Ethan. Son, I need you to be brave right now. Can you do that? Ethan nodded, though his eyes were still wet. Good, because your mom's going to fix this, and I'm going to help her, but we need you to trust us. I do, Kane smiled, then looked at Reese. There's more. What? Brennan's fast-tracking to the investigation. He's calling for a formal hearing in 72 hours. If they rule against you, they can petition to have your security clearance revoked. Reese felt the air leave her lungs. I work with classified veteran records. Without clearance, I lose my job. Exactly. They're trying to destroy my life. They're trying to run you out of town. Kane leaned back. But we're not going to let them. Kane pulled out a folder, opened it. Inside were documents, service records, commendations, photos. We're going to remind them who you are. Reese looked at the papers. Her whole military career laid out in black and white. Awards for valor, letters of recommendation from commanding officers, mission reports that were still partially redacted even after all these years. And at the bottom, a single photograph. Afghanistan 2014. Her team, 6 operators, all smiling despite the dust and exhaustion. 3 of them were dead now. I don't want to use this, she said quietly. I know, but they're not giving you a choice. Kane's voice was gentle. Reese, you earned every word in that file, every medal, every commendation. You bled for this country. You lost friends for it. And now some small-town politician and his spoiled kid are trying to erase that because you defended your son. That's not acceptable. She looked at Ethan. He was watching her with those wide, trusting eyes. Mom, what did you do in Afghanistan? She'd never told him, never wanted him to know about that part of her life. The violence, the loss, the choices that still kept her up at night. But maybe it was time. I saved people, she said simply, and I stopped bad people from hurting innocents. Like you did at the plaza. Yeah, like that. He nodded slowly. Then you should tell everyone, so they understand. Kane reached across the table and put his hand over hers. The boy's right. It's time to stop hiding, Lieutenant. Time to show them what a real warrior looks like. Reese took a deep breath, let it out slowly. Okay, she said, let's do this. But even as she agreed, a voice in the back of her mind whispered a warning. Once you opened that door, once you let people see the things you'd done, there was no closing it again. And some doors were meant to stay closed. The formal hearing was scheduled for 1000 hours on Friday morning in the county courthouse, a gray stone building that had stood since 1952 and carried the weight of every small-town judgment ever passed within its walls. Reese spent the 2 days leading up to it preparing with Kane the way they used to prepare for missions. Methodically, thoroughly, with the understanding that the smallest detail could mean the difference between success and failure. They compiled evidence, video footage from multiple angles, witness statements, medical reports showing the minimal injuries sustained by Derek Walsh and Tyler Brennan, character references from veterans' co-workers, neighbors. Kane even tracked down 3 members of Reese's old SEAL team who were willing to testify remotely if needed. But the most important piece sat in a manila folder on Kane's kitchen table the night before the hearing. The classified mission report from Afghanistan 2014. Declassified 2 years ago, but never made public. Kane had called in favors to get it. Old connections in the Pentagon. The kind of favors you could only ask once. Reese stared at the folder without opening it. You don't have to read it, Kane said quietly. You lived it. That's the problem. She picked up her coffee. Cold now, she drank it anyway. I spent 6 years trying to forget that day. Now I'm going to have to relive it in front of a room full of strangers. You're going to remind them why you matter, why your service matters, why your restraint at that plaza wasn't weakness. It was strength forged in the worst conditions imaginable. Kane sat down across from her. Reese, I've trained thousands of Marines, worked alongside hundreds of operators. You're in the top 1%, not because you're the deadliest, because you have something most don't. What's that? Judgment, the ability to know when to pull the trigger and when to hold fire. That's rare. And it's exactly what you showed at that plaza. He tapped the folder. This proves it wasn't a fluke, it's who you are. Reese opened the folder. Inside was a mission report. Dry, clinical, the way the military documented horror. Operation Enduring Freedom. Date 14th of March 2014. Location Helmand Province, Afghanistan. Objective extract. Downed pilot Captain James Monroe behind enemy lines. Mission Commander Lieutenant Reese Calloway, SEAL Team 3. She read through the details she tried to forget. The helicopter crash, the distress beacon, her team inserted under cover of darkness, and then the ambush. Taliban fighters, dozens of them. Her team pinned down in a village with 43 civilians sheltering in nearby compounds. She remembered the call that came through, command offering air support, a single airstrike that would eliminate the threat and eliminate the village. The report documented her refusal, her decision to wait, to engage targets one by one with precision fire instead of calling down thunder that would kill innocents along with combatants. 6 hours in prone position, 110-degree heat, 12 confirmed kills, 0 civilian casualties. Pilot extracted alive. The after-action review called it exemplary restraint under extreme duress. Her team called it something else. The day Reese proved she'd rather die than compromise her principles. She closed the folder. They're going to ask why I didn't just call the airstrike, why I risked my team. And you're going to tell them the truth. That some things aren't worth dying for. An innocent life is at the top of that list. Reese nodded, but her hands were shaking slightly. Kane noticed. When's the last time you slept? 2 nights ago. Reese. I know. She rubbed her eyes. Every time I close them, I see Ethan's face when he showed me that post. My kid chief. They came after my kid. I know. And we're going to make them regret it. Kane's voice went hard. But you need to be sharp tomorrow. So you're going to finish that coffee, go home, take one of those sleeping pills the VA gave you that you never use, and get 8 hours. That's an order, Lieutenant. She almost smiled. You can't give me orders anymore, Chief. Watch me. She went home, took the pill, lay in bed staring at the ceiling until the medication pulled her under, and dreamed of Afghanistan. The morning of the hearing, Reese dressed in the one piece of uniform she'd kept. Her Navy service dress, blue jacket. She paired it with black slacks and minimal jewelry, just her dog tags. The ones Kane had given her 18 years ago with his son's name etched on the back. Ethan watched her from the doorway of her bedroom. You look different, he said. Different how? Like the person in the pictures, the soldier one. She knelt down to his level. I need you to stay with Mrs. Kowalski again today, just for a few hours, because of the hearing. Yes. What if they say you did something wrong? Then I'll appeal, and I'll keep fighting until they understand the truth. And if they never understand, Reese pulled him into a hug, held him tight. Then we leave, find somewhere new, start over. I don't want to leave. Neither do I, but sometimes you don't get to choose your battles. You just have to fight the ones that find you. She pulled back, looked him in the eyes. But I promise you, whatever happens, we'll be okay. Because we have each other. He nodded against her shoulder. Kane picked her up at 0930. He wore his dress blues too, full uniform. Ribbons and medals spanning 3 decades of service. He looked like a recruiting poster come to life. You didn't have to wear that, Reese said as she climbed into his truck. Yes, I did. They need to see what real service looks like, both of us. He glanced at her. You ready? No. Good. Means you respect what's at stake. The courthouse steps were packed with people when they arrived. News vans from Nashville and Clarksville. Reporters with cameras, protesters on both sides. Some held signs supporting Reese. Others demanded justice for Derek and Tyler. Sheriff Voss met them at the entrance, his face grim. It's a circus in there, he said. Brennan's got the whole county council present, Walsh and his lawyers, the Brennan family, and about 100 spectators who managed to get seats. Any friendly faces, Kane asked. Some. Veterans groups sent representatives. And there's a woman from the ACLU who's observing. Says if this goes sideways, she's prepared to file discrimination charges. Discrimination. Against you. For being a female veteran. Apparently there's precedent for this kind of targeted harassment in other military towns. Voss lowered his voice. Look off the record. This whole thing stinks. Brennan's got a personal stake and he's using his position to push it. But I'm law enforcement. I have to stay neutral, publicly. Understood, Reese said. But privately, Voss met her eyes. You did the right thing at that plaza. Don't let them convince you otherwise. They entered the courthouse together. The hallway smelled like old wood and nervous sweat. People parted as they walked through, some nodding in support, others glaring with open hostility. The hearing room was smaller than Reese expected. Wood-paneled walls, a raised bench where Commissioner Brennan and 4 other county officials sat, a table for Reese and Kane, another for the Walsh and Brennan families and their legal representation. Gregory Walsh sat beside his son Derek, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Tyler Brennan sat with his parents, his uncle Marcus, watching from the bench with the expression of a judge who'd already reached a verdict. The room quieted as Reese took her seat. Brennan banged his gavel. This hearing is now in session. We're here to investigate the incident that occurred on November 27th at Fairview Plaza involving Reese Calloway and Derek Walsh and Tyler Brennan. He looked down at his notes. Ms. Calloway, you're not required to have legal representation for this proceeding, but you're entitled to it if you wish. I'm representing myself, Reese said, with Master Chief Barrett Kane as my advocate. Brennan's jaw tightened. Very well. Mr. Walsh, would you like to present your case? Gregory Walsh stood. He'd clearly prepared remarks, probably practiced them in a mirror. Commissioners, thank you for convening this hearing. On the afternoon in question, my son Derek and his friend Tyler were approached by Ms. Calloway outside Fairview Plaza. Without provocation, she physically assaulted both young men, causing injury and emotional distress. He gestured to Derek. My son suffered bruised ribs and a sprained wrist. Tyler has bruising on his arm and elbow. These aren't minor injuries. They're the result of a violent attack by someone trained in lethal combat techniques. He paused for effect. Now, we respect Ms. Calloway's service. We do. But service doesn't give someone the right to use violence against civilians. We have laws. We have police. She could have called for help. Instead, she took matters into her own hands. And that's vigilantism, plain and simple. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the Walsh supporters in the crowd. Brennan nodded. Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Ms. Calloway, would you like to respond? Reese stood slowly. She didn't have notes, didn't need them. Mr. Walsh is correct that I used force against his son and Tyler Brennan. But he's incorrect about the circumstances. She reached into her folder and pulled out a tablet. I have video evidence from 6 different angles. Security cameras, dash cams, and cell phones. All of it shows the same thing. Derek Walsh and Tyler Brennan confronted my 10-year-old son. They blocked his path. They verbally threatened him. When I intervened, Derek struck me across the face in front of multiple witnesses. She played the video. The room watched in silence as the events unfolded exactly as she'd described. Derek's hand connecting with her cheek. The crowd's gasp. Ethan's cry. Only after being struck did I respond with physical force, and even then I used the minimum necessary to neutralize the threat. Both men walked away. Both were treated and released the same day. If I'd wanted to cause serious harm, I could have. I didn't, because restraint isn't weakness. It's discipline. Walsh's lawyer stood. Ms. Calloway, isn't it true that you were trained in hand-to-hand combat by the United States Navy? Yes. And isn't it true that you could have killed both men if you'd wanted to? Objection, Kane said sharply. This isn't a trial. There's no discovery here. It's a relevant question, Brennan said. Ms. Calloway, please answer. Reese met the lawyer's eyes. Yes, I could have. And yet you expect us to believe you showed restraint. I don't expect you to believe anything. I'm showing you the evidence. But since you've raised the question of my training, let me address it directly. She pulled out the declassified mission report. March 14, 2014, Helmand Province, Afghanistan. My team was tasked with extracting a downed pilot behind enemy lines. We were ambushed by approximately 40 Taliban fighters. I had authorization to call in an airstrike that would have eliminated the threat. She set the report on the table. I refused, because the airstrike would have also killed 43 civilians sheltering nearby. Instead, I spent 6 hours in prone position, engaging targets one by one with sniper fire. 12 confirmed kills, 0 civilian casualties. Pilot extracted alive. Every member of my team came home. The room was dead silent. That's what my training taught me. Not to kill efficiently, but to protect precisely. To make the hard choice between the easy solution and the right one. That's what I did in Afghanistan. And that's what I did at Fairview Plaza. She sat down. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Marcus Brennan cleared his throat. That's a very compelling story, Miss Calloway, but it doesn't change the fact that you use violence in a civilian setting. What happens next time? What if you miscalculate? What if someone dies? Then hold me accountable, Reese said, but judge me on what I've done, not what you fear I might do. The problem is we can't take that risk. Kane stood. Commissioner Brennan, may I address the council? Go ahead, Chief Kane. Kane walked to the center of the room. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of 30 years in uniform. I've known Marcus Brennan for 40 years. We served together in Desert Storm, fought side by side, saved each other's lives. So when I say this, Marcus, I need you to hear me not as a political opponent, but as your brother in arms. He paused. You're wrong. Brennan's face darkened, but he didn't interrupt. You're wrong about Reese Calloway. You're wrong about what happened at that plaza. And you're wrong about what service means. Kane turned to face the crowd. I trained Reese when she was 18 years old. Fresh out of high school, she wanted to be a Marine. I pushed her harder than I pushed anyone because I saw something in her. Potential, not just physical capability, but moral courage. The thing that makes someone run toward danger when everyone else runs away. He pulled out his phone, showed photos to the council. Young Reese in boot camp, in SEAL training, in combat zones. She graduated top of her class. She earned her trident. She deployed 6 times. She saved American lives and took enemy lives when necessary. And through it all, she never once forgot the most important lesson I taught her. What lesson? One of the other commissioners asked. That power without restraint isn't strength, it's cruelty. Kane's voice went quiet. My son died in a training accident 27 years ago. He was 19. He wanted to be a Marine like his old man, and he would have been a damn fine one. But I never got to see that. Reese has been carrying his dog tags ever since I gave them to her before she went to Buds. Not because she had to, but because she understood the weight of that gift. He turned back to Brennan. You want to punish her for defending her child, for showing the exact restraint we train our warriors to have. You want to destroy her career, her reputation, her life, because your nephew's ego got bruised, and that, Marcus, is the real crime here. The room erupted, shouting from both sides. Brennan banged his gavel repeatedly. Order, we will have order. But the damage was done. The crowd was fractured. Some faces had changed, softened, reconsidered. Tyler Brennan stood up suddenly. His face was red. His hands shook. I need to say something. His uncle looked at him sharply. Tyler, sit down. No. Tyler's voice cracked. I need to say this. Brennan hesitated, then nodded. Go ahead. Tyler looked at Reese, then at the floor. We started it, Derek and me. We saw her kid, and we thought it'd be funny to mess with him. And when she stepped in, Derek got mad because she didn't back down. So he hit her. Derek grabbed his arm. Dude, what are you doing? Tyler shook him off. I'm telling the truth. We were wrong, and she could have really hurt us, but she didn't. She just stopped us. He looked at his uncle. I know you wanted to protect me, but I don't need protecting from her. I need to take responsibility for what I did. The room went silent again. Marcus Brennan's face was stone. Tyler, we'll discuss this later. No. Tyler's voice was stronger now. I'm done lying about it. She didn't do anything wrong. We did. He sat down. Derek stared at him like he'd just committed treason. Brennan looked at the other commissioners. They whispered among themselves. Then Brennan faced Reese. Ms. Calloway, in light of this testimony, the council is prepared to dismiss all allegations against you. However, we must insist that you agree to certain conditions moving forward. What conditions? That you complete an anger management course, that you submit to periodic psychological evaluations, and that you agree to have no contact with Derek Walsh or Tyler Brennan for a period of 1 year. Kane shot to his feet. That's outrageous. You're making her prove she's not dangerous when she's done nothing but show remarkable control. Those are the terms, Brennan said flatly. Reese stood. She looked at Brennan, then at Walsh, then at the crowd. No, she said quietly. Excuse me. I said no. I won't agree to those conditions. I won't submit to evaluations that question my mental health when I'm not the one who initiated violence. I won't complete anger management when I didn't act in anger. And I won't be treated like a threat to this community when all I did was protect my child. Then we'll have no choice but to recommend charges be filed. Then file them. Reese's voice was calm, final. And I'll see you in court, where a judge and jury will hear the full story, including how a county commissioner used his position to harass a veteran because his nephew couldn't handle being held accountable. Brennan's face went pale. Are you threatening me? I'm promising you that if you push this, I'll push back. With every resource I have, every connection, every veterans organization in the state, and they'll ask questions about conflicts of interest, about abuse of power, about why you're so invested in destroying someone who did nothing wrong. Sheriff Voss stood up from the back row. Commissioner, I've reviewed all the evidence. Ms. Calloway acted in self-defense. If you push charges, I won't support them, and I'll testify on her behalf if needed. Other voices rose. Veterans, neighbors, even some who'd been skeptical. She's right. This is harassment. Leave her alone. Brennan looked around the room, saw the tide turning. His jaw worked. This hearing is adjourned, he said finally, pending further review. He banged the gavel and stood walking out quickly. The other commissioners followed. Marcus Brennan was the last to leave. He stopped beside Reese's table. This isn't over, he said quietly. Yes, it is, Kane replied. You just don't know it yet. Brennan left without another word. The crowd dispersed slowly. Some people approached Reese to shake her hand, to apologize, to thank her. Tyler Brennan walked past, head down, but Reese stopped him. Hey. He looked up, nervous. Thank you, Reese said, for telling the truth. That took courage. He nodded. I'm sorry for all of it. I know, but here's the thing about mistakes. You can't undo them. You can only learn from them. How do I do that? Reese thought for a moment. Start by being the kind of person who doesn't need to prove anything. The kind who protects instead of threatens. Who lifts up instead of tears down. She paused. It's harder than it sounds, but it's worth it. Tyler nodded again, then walked away. Derek Walsh stood by the door with his father. He didn't approach, didn't apologize, just stared at Reese with something between resentment and grudging respect. She didn't expect anything from him. Some people learned, some people didn't. Outside the sun was high and bright. Kane put a hand on her shoulder. You did good in there, Lieutenant. We're not done yet. Brennan's going to keep pushing. Let him. You just showed this whole town who you are. That matters more than any hearing. He smiled. Besides, I already made some calls. The VA's regional director heard about this. She's not happy. Brennan might find his federal funding for county programs suddenly under review. Reese looked at him. Chief, you didn't have to do that. Yes, I did, because that's what family does. We protect each other. He pulled out the dog tags from beneath his uniform jacket, an identical set to the ones Reese wore. My son would have been proud to know you. Hell, I'm proud to know you. Reese felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them back. Thank you for everything. Don't thank me yet. We still have work to do. 6 months later, Reese stood on a stage at Fort Campbell's annual Veterans Day ceremony. The base commander had asked her to speak. She'd tried to decline. Kane convinced her otherwise. People need to hear your story, he'd said, about the classified version, the human one. So she stood at the podium looking out at hundreds of faces, active duty soldiers, veterans, family members, and in the third row, 2 young men she recognized, Derek Walsh and Tyler Brennan. They'd both enrolled in her self-defense class at the community center 3 months ago. Quietly, no fanfare, just 2 kids trying to learn something they should have known all along. Ethan sat in the front row beside Kane, both of them watching her with pride. I wasn't going to come today, Reese began, because I don't think of myself as special. I'm just someone who did their job. But a very wise man recently reminded me that service doesn't end when you take off the uniform. She paused, met Kane's eyes. Master Chief Barrett Kane taught me something 20 years ago when I was young and thought being tough meant being hard. He taught me that real warriors protect the weak even when the weak don't deserve it, even when it costs them. She looked at Tyler and Derek. He taught me that everyone deserves a second chance, and that the strongest person in any room isn't the one who can hurt the most people. It's the one who chooses not to. Her voice softened. A few months ago, I was tested, not in combat, but in a parking lot, by two young men who made bad choices, and I had to decide what kind of person I was, what kind of example I'd set for my son. She looked at Ethan. I chose restraint, not because I was afraid, but because I've seen what unchecked power does. And I've learned that the hardest battles aren't the ones you fight with your hands. They're the ones you fight with your conscience. The crowd was silent. That's what service means, not glory, not recognition, just the quiet knowledge that you did the right thing when it mattered most. She stepped back from the podium. The applause started slowly, then built, until the entire crowd was on their feet. Reese didn't cry, didn't smile, just nodded once and walked off the stage. Kane met her at the bottom of the steps. Proud of you, Lieutenant. Couldn't have done it without you, Chief. Ethan ran up and hugged her waist. Over his head, Reese saw Tyler and Derek standing at the edge of the crowd. Tyler raised his hand in a small wave. Derek nodded once. She nodded back. Because some lessons took time. Some people needed second chances. And some battles were won not with force, but with patience. That evening after the ceremony, Reese found a letter tucked under her windshield wiper. The handwriting was careful, deliberate. Miss Calloway. I'm sorry it took me 6 months to write this. Derek and I started your class because the judge said we had to, but we stayed because we wanted to. You could have destroyed us that day at the plaza. Instead, you taught us something we didn't know we needed to learn. That being strong doesn't mean winning. It means choosing not to fight. Thank you for giving us a second chance. And thank you for showing us what real courage looks like. Tyler Brennan Reese folded the letter carefully and put it in her pocket beside Kane's dog tags. Then she drove home to her son. And for the first time in 6 months, she slept without dreaming of Afghanistan. Because the battle was over. And she'd won it the only way that mattered. With restraint, with honor, with the quiet valor of those who served in silence and never stopped serving at all.